Hi, everyone. I'm Emiliana Guereca, founder, executive director, CEO of Women's March Action, a political organization that started after organizing the largest march in Los Angeles. Our organization aims to have equity for women, whether it's in the political world, tech world, business world, you name it, women want equity. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about diversity and inclusion. And a little bit, I mean a little bit, because it is a subject that can be tough. We have to have the tough conversations. So I want to talk about the difference between diversity and inclusion and belonging, right? So diversity is the representation of different people. Diversity is, when Latina women are represented, when Black women are represented, when Asian women are represented. But that's just a little bit of the factor of diversity and inclusion. When we talk about inclusion, it is ensuring that everyone has an equal opportunity to contribute, to influence every part and every level of the workplace. And when we talk about that, it means that we belong. It means that we are ensuring that we belong in those spaces, that we are not tokenized. So diversity and inclusion is the idea that people belong. In the tech world, diversity and inclusion is an ongoing issue in the sector. Diversity and inclusion in general is an issue across the country in many sectors. But when we look at the overall workforce in tech, it is comprised of only 34% of women in the tech force. And when we talk about Latina women within tech, it is even a lower number. And considering that women are 51% of the population, we're not doing great in those numbers. So across industries, progress towards gender parity and gender equity in the workforce has been globally slow. And business, tech in particular, is in a position to do something to dismantle racism, to dismantle gender parity. We have the power to do this within tech. Why? Because we all use tech, and tech in general should have more of a gender parity norm than what it has. We can't dismantle racism. We cannot attack it from the terms of schools, from politics, but within business and within tech, we do and are in a position to reach gender parity within the workforce. And what does that look like? Well, it looks like inclusive organizations. When we talk about inclusivity, inclusive organizations are twice as likely to meet or exceed their financial targets. So that's beneficial. Company profits and share performances are close to 50% higher where women are well represented at the top, right? And then gender diverse and inclusive teams outperform gender homogenous, less inclusive teams by an average of 50%. So when we talk about profits, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we have to talk about what's the bottom line. The bottom line there is that profits will rise when we are part of an inclusive organization. Senior level women influence company culture in positive ways, particularly when it comes to championing diversity and inclusion and mentoring other women. In particular, for me, it's critical that Latina women be included in the conversations, because when we see ourselves in leadership positions, we tend to bring our sisters with us. So organizations with inclusive cultures are 6 times as likely to be innovative and agile. And so when we talk about inclusivity and diversity, we need to make sure that it's not just a Black and white issue as it was in the 90s with affirmative action. True story, most people do not understand that affirmative action really helped white women more than any other sector. So we're getting there as far as helping women, but we now need to be more inclusive with our Black and Brown sisters in the workforce. So how can we do that? How can we have the conversation, the tough conversation, because it never is an easy conversation when we talk about diversity and inclusion. So we need to rethink policies. We need to rethink policies and practices. For example, flexible working hours for family-friendly policies and equal pay for equal work. Mind blown, right? The fact that it's 2020 and we are talking about equal pay and equal work tells us that we are not there. We're not there yet. And equal pay for equal work doesn't just benefit women. They benefit business. They benefit because they allow us to attract more women. They allow us to attract more qualified leads when we know that a company is inclusive. We also have to look at potential, not just experience. We have to look at job descriptions that are heavily based on current competencies and prior experience, because if we have experience that women are not being hired, that Latina women are not being hired in certain sectors, then we lack some of that experience, right? Because we were not able to come into the fold early on. So what happened is, prior experiences, we are likely to be missing out on a pool of talent of women. So I would really look at potential when we practice hiring. The other one is to give a voice to everyone. I always say that when we develop policies, how are women included in policies? How are women included in the hiring process? Because it makes no sense to have a room full of men deciding what paternity leave looks like. We have no voice when a room full of men are making decisions for women. And this is critical when we talk about inclusion. Inclusion really is like being invited to a party. Imagine yourself being invited to a party, to a meeting, but you're in the corner and you have no say, and you really have no leadership within the organization. So we want to make sure that when we are aiming to attract Latina women, Black women, Asian women, that we start to build policies and procedures that will bring them in, that will retain them, that will give them a voice within the organization, but more importantly, leadership, and not tokenizing our sisters. The other thing is really investing in developing an inclusive driven culture. We want to hire, develop, and keep a diverse workforce. We have to be willing to have the tough conversations. We have to be willing to look around the room and really be thoughtful about who is making the decisions. And so looking at the obstacles that someone may face. I have been in rooms where I am the only Latina. And this is in 2020, I have been in rooms where I get confused for the cleaning lady. I've been confused for the help. And so really investing in what education is also going to be brought into, but more than anything, not just investing in training, webinars, and all of that without putting it in place. Without the action, we're just dreaming about diversity and inclusion. We must be able to have the tough conversations and bring in collaborative leaders to see what inclusion looks like. So that is part. So the diversity and inclusion movement, has made inroads in the technology sector over the past few years, but the pace of progress is just too slow. And it's too slow for me as a Latina woman, and I hope it's too slow for you as well. So we as women are still facing significant challenges, and post-COVID, it is really critical that we look at policies, and look at how our companies are being inclusive, look at what policies are set forth, look at what an inclusive organization looks like. When we talk about that, we're looking at Google, we're looking at Microsoft, we are looking at Apple, Facebook. What does that look like within different departments, within the organization? What has been done to make sure that an inclusive organization is at the forefront? So I would say within the past year, COVID-19 pandemic really has threatened and set women even further back. We've set us back at least 10 years based on how many women left the workforce due to lack of childcare, due to being laid off and whatnot. So moving forward, we need to make sure that there is space for women, for Latina women within the tech sector. And that comes into play at looking at potential and not experience. So when we look back at what diversity and inclusion looks like within the tech sector, know that business and tech is in a position to do something about gender equality and dismantling racism like no other institution is. So we are at a moment where tech will be leading the conversation and is leading the conversation on gender equity, equal pay for equal work. It'll take us a little bit to get there, but we're at 34% women. We need to bring it higher. We need to consistently advocate and have the tough conversations so that when we look at the room, our room looks like our society looks like, which is 51% women. We've got our Latina sisters, our Asian sisters, our Black sisters in the room. It is not homogenous, and it is not just a male-dominated industry. It is critical that we all speak up when it comes to diversity and inclusion, because it is a sense of belonging. Diversity and inclusion is we belong in the tech world. Own your space. Thank you. I'm Emiliana Guereca with Women's March Action, and I hope to see you soon. Hasta luego.